Hello, everyone. Welcome to a live reading. YouTube live readings. I was doing these on Facebook and Instagram, and I realized, well, that's dumb. Those are both the same platform. So I am now going to do them on YouTube and Instagram. So we'll be starting Instagram here in just a second. I just wanted to make sure this was actually going to go live because for a second there, it wasn't going to. So let's see. You can see the pigacorn. This is important, very important. You can see me. We can see the chat. I can see the time. This is all helpful. All right, let's go live on Instagram. Ultimately, I'm not even going to be able to look at the chat because I'm going to be reading. So good morning, Instagram. It is Monday, June 15th, my mother's birthday. We're also live on YouTube. If you would prefer to follow me there, the link is in my bio. I think all my links are in the bio. Anyway, you can also find it on my website. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Today, I'm going to be reading The Glass Mountain, which is technically a reread. I read this at the end of April or the beginning of May. But today is my mother's birthday. Happy birthday, Mom! She would be watching, only she has an appointment at the DMV because you have those on your birthday here in Florida. And it's, happy birthday to you, go to the DMV. And they're now doing those new licenses that have the stars on them. So if you didn't have one, now you need one. Thankfully, I have one because my picture is beautiful. So my mother is dressing herself all up and going to the DMV right now. So she actually called me and said, I'm not going to be there for the live show and I feel so bad. So Mom, this is to you. I love you. I hope you are watching this in the replay. Mwah. I love you so much. She just joined Instagram like a little while ago. I will be reading the first half of The Glass Mountain per my mother's request. And on Thursday, I will read the second half because this is a bit of a long story. So we're going to break it up. If I tried to read the whole thing, Instagram would kick me off. So this is just the best way to do it. And this is of the stories I have written, this ties for first place. My other favorite one is The Unicorn Hunter, which is also available in this beautiful little chapbook. Bianca Roman-Stumpf did the cover of this chapbook. So I highly recommend picking it up. I still have a few that are signed by me and Bianca. Again, the link is in the bio. This is based on a fairy tale called Old Rink Rink. It's a fairy tale about a princess who falls inside a glass mountain. If you have not read the fairy tale, that's your homework. Or go on YouTube and look up my fairy tale rant about Old Rink Rink because that's kind of hilarious. It's one of the inspirations for this particular fairy tale. This is the fairy tale that I wish could come true for me in real life. So there. That's your secret today. Happy birthday, Mom. Cheers. The Glass Mountain by Alethea Contis. Read by the author. Once upon a time, long after the Wizard War, in the third age of fairy, the kingdom of Upper Reaches was separated from the rest of the world by a glass mountain. Who had created this mountain, none could say. Origin stories spoke of wrathful gods, angry dragons, powerful wizards, and star-crossed lovers, but none of the myriad tales agreed. Had it been a beautiful, clear mountain that sparkled like diamonds or cast rainbows at sunrise and sunset, it might have been less of a burden to the kingdom. Unfortunately, the glass was black as cinder soot and tolerated only the sparsest of foliage, making it little more than an inconvenient eyesore. Locally, it was referred to as the bane of Upper Reaches. More than one king had tried to smash the bane to pieces and establish a trade route straight through the thing, but the sinister glass always seemed to regrow overnight. The mountain itself was not impassable, It was the fastest route to the kingdom, to be sure, and brave travelers had worn many a footpath on its heights. But hedge witches' tales of hauntings and curses made every attempt to assemble a road crew completely futile. So long, wide trails were established on either side of the mountain, and the cost of imported goods remained steep, but upper reaches thrived just the same. The most recent king of Upper Reaches had 2 daughters, both with skin as bronze as their northern subjects and hair as black as the mountain. The eldest had eyes as gray as storm clouds, while the youngest's eyes were clear and blue as the summer sky. The girls had tempers to match. The eldest, Sabine, was the clever warrior. The youngest, Zona, was the calm mediator. When Sabine reached marriageable age, her father betrothed her to Prince Eldon of Winding Dale, a well-to-do kingdom south of the Glass Mountain. Sabine made the exhaustive journey to Winding Dale for the betrothal ceremony, where it was discovered that the prince and princess got along very well indeed. Eldon was as adventurous as he was handsome, and had a spirit that rivaled Sabine's own. They toured the countryside on the way back to Upper Reaches, where the wedding ceremony was to be held, and the couple was loved by all who made their acquaintance. When they reached the base of the Glass Mountain, the carriages came to a halt. The driver asked Sabine whether she wished to go around to the right or left, as from this spot both directions were equidistant. "Why must we go around at all?" Eldon stepped out of the carriage and peered up at the mountain. "Surely over is the fastest route." "It is," Sabine confirmed, "but there's no road suitable for the horses and carriages." "There are paths suitable enough for us, surely," said Eldon. "I spot at least 4 from where I'm standing." "Perhaps, I admit, I've never set foot on the Glass Mountain." Eldon turned to Sabine, his dark eyes sparkling. "Then it is the perfect adventure for us to take together. The carriages can meet us on the other side. What do you say?" And he held his hand out to her. Sabine gave the matter a moment's serious thought. She was tired of sitting in a carriage. She did miss her sister terribly. It would be such a relief to see her home again. And she was always up for an adventure. So she took his hand, disembarked, and together they made their way up the mountain. At first, they tread carefully, but once they found their footing, they became children, chasing and racing each other to the top. By the time they reached the summit, Sabine's face was flushed, her breathing heavy, and her heartbeat hammered in her ears. She looked down upon her kingdom, set like a gem in the mountains. She marveled at the majestic beauty of it all, her world, her home, the man she was going to marry, and thought that she had not been happier in her whole life. And then the mountain swallowed her whole. What happened exactly was impossible to tell. One minute there had been solid ground beneath her feet, and in the next there was not. She screamed as she fell down. A hole? Tunnel? Was the mountain itself hollow? She stopped screaming when the fear left her, when it felt more like she was flying than falling. It was too dark to get a sense of her surroundings, but she made out what might have been lichen or crystals glowing in the walls as she sped past. She spread out her arms in an attempt to slow her descent, tried to shift her position closer to one of the brighter walls, and in doing so, collided with something. No, someone. Sabine and the someone tumbled the rest of the way down in a shower of rocks or glass, and she knew not what else. Something caught them, some sort of thick sheet tangled around her, and while trying to extract herself, she fell again and hit her head on the floor. The someone bent over her prone form, a man by the stench of him, with some sort of strange glowing hat. He said something to her, yelled at her, but she could not answer as her body succumbed to shock, and the blackness consumed her. Sabine woke in her bed, but it was not her bed. These sheets were not silk. The wooden posters were carved with a variety of fantastical beasts, and the velvet curtains which hung from the rails were succumbing to rot. The air was dank, and where there should have been a casement, the flickering candlelight fell on a solid wall. Dark glass wall. She turned her head toward the light gingerly, as she was still in a great deal of pain. There, on a small table, was a candle that had burned almost to the quick. And there, in the large chair beside the table, slept the equally large man she had smelled earlier. Sabine slipped out of the bed sheets and tiptoed closer. Sharp pebbles stabbed into the soles of her feet. The man was a mess. Dirt and grime and, was that blood? Covered his matted hair and a full, long beard. Sabine glanced down at her own torn and filthy dress. She didn't look much better. Sabine wondered as she studied the man. Was this the wizard who had built the mountain, or the beast who had been imprisoned inside it? Based on the fact that she'd fallen upon him while he had no doubt been attempting his escape, she assumed, at the very least, that he, like her, was a victim of the bane. A man and a maiden trapped beneath a magic mountain. Sabine had heard enough stories to know how this enchantment needed to end. Scrunching up her nose, oh, gods, this man was rank. She bent down and puckered up. He stopped her with both hands when her face was mere inches from his own. His eyes were a milky green, the like of which had not been seen in upper reaches for 1,000 years. "What are you doing?" he growled. Heavens, his breath was fouler than the rest of him. "I was going to kiss you to break the curse," she said, though the thought of doing so now made her quite sick to her stomach. He tilted her chin so that she looked upward. "This is not a curse," he said each word slowly and precisely as if she were simple-minded. "It's a mountain. And I'm not in the habit of kissing women who try to kill me." Sabine wrenched her face out of his hard grasp and stepped away from him. "Fine, have it your way, rank. "Thank you, Mother Mandrake, I believe I will." Sabine scowled at the nickname he'd given her. Mandrake? Rink surveyed her filthy form from head to toe. "I'll vow I've pulled more attractive roots than you in all my years down here. But the moniker fits all the same." He stood up from the chair, goodness, he was tall, and crossed to the ornate chest of drawers at the foot of the bed, where he retrieved several items of clothing. "Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to bathe. And since you no longer appear to be dying, be a dear and clean up the mess you made while I'm gone." He crossed back to another wall, opened a door there, and closed it behind him. Sabine stood and blinked at the door for a good long while, sure that the fall had addled her brain. For sanity's sake, she tried to concentrate on only one thing at a time. Firstly, she did not mind that he was going to take a bath. In fact, she was relieved that she would not be trapped down here with the foul stench of him. Secondly, there was a bath behind that door. Thirdly, there was a door inside a mountain. Granted, it was a magic mountain, one that had swallowed her up and into which she had fallen miles without meeting her death at the bottom. It was entirely feasible there might be a door, and a chair, and a table, and a bed, and a dresser, and what else? The candle flickered again. Sabine did not have much time to find another light source. She lifted the candle and, cupping the dying flame, stepped quickly around the room. Apart from a few cupboards and an empty basket, there was little else along the wall. But in the middle of the room, she discovered a large brazier filled with dark stones she recognized. She held the candle to the coals and prayed that they would catch. Even so far down, some god must have heard her petition, for the coals took up the light and heat of the tiny flame. The space instantly warmed. and brightened as the coal fire reflected off crystals and facets in the glass mountain. If it had not been a cavern at the bottom of the Bain, Sabine might have called it cozy. There were no windows, of course, but the floor, it was indeed a proper floor, was smooth enough to have been installed by her castle's very own stonemasons. A pile of cloth large enough to be the sail of a ship, was this what had caught them? Was crumpled up on one end of the room. Other than the well-crafted furniture she had already noted, and the dust and rubble from their avalanche that covered everything, there were no other features. Apart from that door. Sabine stared at the door again. Fifthly, or was it seventhly? If there really was a bath beyond that door, she would desperately love to make use of it herself. She tiptoed back over to the chest of drawers. The handle on each drawer had been designed to look like dragons in flight. The metal was cool to the touch. The top drawer contained naught but a few precious candles. Since the brazier was doing its job tolerably well, she decided to preserve them. The second drawer contained nothing. Oh, please, she prayed. All she needed were some linen underclothes to keep her warm, a shirt and trousers. That would set her up nicely. Miraculously, in the third drawer, she found exactly those things. Curious. Sabine turned back to the four-poster bed and noted the crumpled sheets where her dirty body had lain. She could beat the glass and dust out of the heavier blankets, but it would be nice to have a set of fresh sheets and pillowcases, she said aloud, and a pair of thick-soled slippers. Instead of pulling out the fourth drawer, she reopened the second. The drawer that had previously contained nothing now held one set of fresh sheets and pillowcases, and a pair of pale blue slippers, just her size. Thank you, she said to the drawer, or the mountain, or whatever God was looking out for her. She sat down right there and painstakingly extracted the pebbles and slivers of glass from her feet before donning the slippers. Once her feet were protected, she pulled back the curtains and set about stripping the bed, being careful not to inhale the glass dust that she sent flying. She beat the mattresses and pillows until they were fluffy again and feathers flew, and then made the bed with fresh sheets. Now, hands on hips, she stared at the rest of the messy room. What I could really use right now is a broom. She walked over to the tall cupboard, the one with the gnomes and the house sprites carved into its door, and opened it to find one sturdy broom. Thank you, she said to the cupboard, and promptly set about sweeping the floor clear, beating the coverlet, and then sweeping the floor again. When the man finally emerged through the door, Sabine was sitting in a chair, enjoying a cup of tea, provided by the smaller ivy wreath cupboard, exhausted but congratulating herself on a job well done. Unsurprisingly, the man was not so lavish in his praise. Still toweling his hair dry, he took in the room, the pile of rubble and dirty bedclothes, the cup of tea, and harumphed. Well, you're clever at least. That's helpful. He tossed the towel into the empty basket, and it disappeared. You can put the dirty sheets and rubbish in there. Sabine was sorely tempted to reply to the man's gruff manner with one of her own. She remembered her father's training and tried politeness instead. I was hoping to have a bath of my own, she said with her head held high. Please. The man hesitated a moment. Would he really withhold such a thing from her after all the work she'd done? And then nodded. He opened the door with a flourish. Allow me to introduce you to the water closet. Sabine gasped. The floor and walls and ceiling of the sizable room were a white marble that glowed with its own inner light. The brightness gave her a chance to see the man better. His hair and beard were dark with damp. She suspected when they dried they would be a great deal fairer than her own black mane. The rest of him was certainly cleaner, but still large and scruffy. and grumpy and tall. Beyond him, along the far wall, were a chamber pot, wash basin, and bath, but none like she had ever seen before. The chamber pot is self-washing, the man said, depressing a lever to demonstrate. The levers that control the basin spout are here. This one brings forth warm water, and this one cold. Same with the bath. Only this, he turned a third handle in the middle, controls the rinser. He pointed to a spout above the tub with a flattened end, roughly the height at which one of Sabine's maids would have poured clean water over her at the end of a bath. Extraordinary, breathed Sabine. She stepped bravely into the white room, entranced by the perfect reflection of her bedraggled self in the full-length mirror beside the wash basin. Its frame was thick. Glowing gems rode scrolling waves of glass as black as the mountain. There were no hammer marks on the surface of the mirror anywhere. It looked more like liquid silver poured by ancient dwarves. Sabine stretched out a hand to caress its smooth surface. Is it enchanted? She asked. You're standing in a water closet at the bottom of a glass mountain and you're asking if the mirror is enchanted? The man harumphed again. Take all the time you need. Toss your clothes in the basket afterward. I'm going to bed. Sabine tried to forgive his ill manner. The man was no doubt tired after a long day of climbing the inside of a mountain and then being fallen upon by a clearly unwanted house guest. But she continued her attempts to make the best of the situation. I'm Sabine, by the way, she said as he left the room. I don't care, he replied and shut the door behind him. Sabine scowled at the door and then turned her attention to the much more pleasant task of bathing. In the black glass cabinet beside the door, this one featuring a young woman with eagle's wings, she discovered soft, fluffy towels, large cakes of soap, and several pretty colored bottles whose mysterious contents smelled divine. She immediately began divesting herself of her clothes, but contrary to the man's suggestion, she didn't want to get rid of them. This dress, dirty and torn as it was her one link to her family, her kingdom, her life, and she wasn't ready to part with it. She took great pains to brush off as much of the grime as she could before deciding her own filthy body was more worth the effort. She stepped out of her shoes. As she suspected, her bare feet left blood trails where the glass shards had punctured the soles, and gently stepped into the bath. The rinsing spout was a wonder, the warm water a blessing on her aching bones. She crumbled the cake of soap into her hair, rinsing again and again until the water ran clear. She used a cloth gently on her arms and legs and the soles of her feet, but she could tell that the various scrapes and wounds were already healing. By the time she stepped out of the bath, she felt a great deal improved, both inside and out. Sabine wrapped a towel around herself and quietly stepped out into the cavern, where her clean shirt and trousers were still piled on the table by the chair. Gentle snoring filled the air. The man was spread out face down across the bed that he obviously did not intend to share with her. She dressed quickly, tossed the towel in the basket, and went to the chest of drawers. The first drawer gave her blankets, and the second gave her pillows. With them, she curled up on the floor by the brazier, and in the damp, dark quiet at the base of the Bane of Upper Reaches, brave Sabine cried herself to sleep. She woke to the sound of falling rain, but it was not rain. It was rubble falling on the canopy that had been stretched out above her. She scurried to the empty bed on the other side of the cavern, in case the pebbles became rocks and smashed her head in. She didn't want to be the next thing tossed into the basket. Sabine stared above the canopy into the darkness, but old Rink Rink was nowhere to be seen. Is this what he did all day, every day? Try to scale the mountain from the inside? She tried to remember how far she'd fallen before she'd run into him on the way down. However high he'd climbed thus far, he still had a way to go. Years. He said he'd been down here for years. It was very possible she would never see her family again. Before her emotions could get the better of her, Sabine rushed to the water closet, used the chamber pot, and retrieved her damaged dress. There was no sense in trying to keep the room tidy if rocks would be clattering down all day long, so she decided to tackle this new chore. It took her the better part of the day, not that she knew what day or night was anymore, and a very accommodating drawer that provided a needle and thread along with a simple breakfast of bread and cheese. But eventually, she had cleaned and mended her dress sufficiently enough. She mentally thanked her father's guards for teaching her how to care for her saddle and blankets and sew her own tack. She would never have been able to tailor a dress from scratch, but mending one hadn't been too much trouble. Now, where to put it? Sabine worried that if she left it in a drawer or cupboard, it might disappear like the basket, or that good old Rink Rank would find it and dispose of it for her. So she hugged the dress tightly and shoved it under the mattress, praying that it would remain there, safe. She puttered uselessly around the chamber for the remainder of the time. She lit the brazier again. The fire had died out while she was sleeping, but the coals had happily replenished themselves. She had a small lunch and more tea, even sang a few songs and danced a few dances, until they made her wistful for her homeland. Eventually, she laid down in the bed and fell back to blissful sleep. The stench woke her. Sabine gagged. "You reek of brimstone." He ignored her. "Time to tidy up, Mother Mandrake." "My name is Sabine," she said as she sat up. Rink Rank removed his climbing helmet and placed it on the chest. He rummaged in the top drawer and pulled out some clean clothes. The ones he wore not only stunk, they were shredded and covered in dirt and glass. She could see angry red scrapes on his skin through the tears. "So you keep reminding me," he said as he shoved the drawer closed. "Afraid I'm going to mistake you for some other princess?" Sabine crossed her arms over her chest. "Why are you so sure I'm a princess?" "Just a guess. I'm right, though, aren't I? Ridiculously long hair, flawless skin, and that dress you fell down here in is only a color worn by royalty." "How do you know that?" He shrugged. "Saw the same color in a portrait once. Only royalty are pompous enough to have portraits made of themselves." "But how would you have seen that portrait in the first place?" Sabine narrowed his eyes at him. "Are you a prince?" "I am no one," he said gruffly, and slammed the door of the water closet behind him. Frustrated, Sabine hopped off the bed. She was not ready to finish the conversation. She would harass and harangue him until he had answered every single one of her questions. It's not like she had anything else to do. She slid her feet into the thick-soled slippers and set about straightening the bed sheets and lighting the brazier. And sweeping the remnants of Rink Rank's mountain climbing into the basket before he emerged from the bath. When he finally did, she was waiting for him. "How long have you been down here?" she asked. His response to her question was a cross between a wince and a grimace. "It's been a long day, Mandrake, and I'm still sore from the beating you gave me yesterday. Let me sleep in peace, I beg you." A long day? What marked a day down here anyway? And how did he know? But those were not the most pressing of her questions. 5, she said. He wearily lowered himself to the edge of the bed. "What?" "Answer 5 of my questions, and I will leave you to sleep in peace." He pinched the bridge of his nose and rubbed his forehead sleepily. "Fine," he growled. "How long have you been down here?" she asked again. "I don't know." She tapped her foot. "That's not good enough." "I don't have any other answer to give you. You might have noticed time has little meaning where the sun never shines." "How old were you?" "You might have noticed time has little meaning where the sun never shines." "How old were you when you came to this place?" 15. he said softly. Sabine tried to control her shock. It was difficult to tell with the beard, but she might have guessed he was almost twice that now. To have been trapped in the dark for so long, it was a wonder he had not lost his mind completely. And how did you come here? Did you fall, as I did? Thankfully, no. Without a canopy to catch me, I might not have lived to tell the tale. I got lost while searching in some mountain caves with my friend. Found my way here and never found my way back again. Which mountains? She asked. The White Mountains. Sabine brightened. So you're from the north too? Could it be she'd managed to stumble onto a kindred spirit? I suppose so. And that answers your final question. Good night, Mandrake. If he insisted on referring to her as that ugly root, she would happily respond in kind. Good night, Rink Rank. Sabine tiptoed around the cavern and tried to make as little noise as possible, but it didn't seem to matter. Rink Rank's soft snoring came soon and interrupted. Knowing that he had stumbled onto this oubliette instead of falling, inspired her to run her hands along every wall, nook, and cranny. She found nothing but a stray button and a few glowing gems, the latter of which she placed with their brothers under the band of Rink Rank's climbing helmet. Hands on hips, Sabine stared up at the climbing wall, as far into the abyss as the brazier would let her see. Assuming day to mean time awake, she guessed that Rink Rank spent every one of his days up there, working on a way out. Impossible as it might be, it was the only viable escape route. And at some point, she would have to climb it. Sabine was fit enough from riding horses and small weapons training she'd badgered her father's guards into teaching her. She knew she didn't possess the full body strength, upper body in particular, that she would need to upper body in particular, to climb a boulder, let alone a mostly glass mountain. She would need to become proficient in as much time as it took for Rink Rank to finish the route. She glanced over at the bed and Rink Rank's large sleeping body upon it. Given that it would be a while before this path hit sunlight, she did not need to start her climbing practice tonight. Shh, she said to the brazier, and the light in the burning coals dimmed. Sabine tilted her head back. She missed stars, but the glowing gems in the wall above made mystical patterns of their own, so she wished upon them anyway. She slid open the top drawer to retrieve a candle. There was a book waiting there for her as well. She procured a cup of tea from the ivy cupboard and lit the candle before setting down in the chair to read about a fantastic lower-class family full of sisters and their misadventures. The story made Sabine miss her own sister quite dearly, and the taciturn Mr. Darcy reminded her very much of someone she'd just met. A rough hand shook her awake. Sabine opened her eyes to see Rink Rank's hairy face staring down at her. The glow of crystals on his helmet cast a shadow over her eyes. I'm off to work, he grumbled. Go to bed. This chair is terrible for sleeping, trust me. Nodding sluggishly, Sabine closed the book in her lap and obeyed. She curled up in the bed and covered herself in blankets while she watched Rink Rank prepare for work. He buckled on his belt full of tools, then pulled out the canopy and affixed each corner to a hook in the wall before grasping a protruding rock and ascending into the darkness. A lot of rocks and glass chunks fell that day, some of them quite sizable. Sabine spent most of her time in areas of the cavern not covered by the canopy, just to be safe. The rest of it she spent learning how to climb the glass mountain from the inside. The drawer provided her with new, strange-soled slippers, a climbing helmet of her own, and a bag of what looked like chalk dust. The helmet and shoes were easy enough to figure out. The dust she learned to use after the first time her sweaty hand slipped off a ledge. She climbed until her muscles quivered with the strain, and then rested, bathed, finished her book, laid down in the bed, and fell back to sleep. Awoke in the darkness with the canopy still pulled tight. Rink Rank had not returned. Sabine dusted her hands and scaled the mountain wall high enough to see if the canopy had caught Rink Rank's dead body sometime in the night. It had not, so she assumed he was still alive and went about her day. She needed to believe that he was all right, If he was hurt up there somewhere, he would be dead long before she was proficient enough at climbing to reach him. She stretched her sore muscles and tended to the larger scrapes on her forearm with a salve provided by the angel cabinet. She tidied what rubble had escaped the canopy and then set about her climbing practice again. She was finishing up her bath when Rink Rank returned and hammered on the door of the water closet. "Hurry up!" he bellowed. Sabine only hurried because she wanted to know why he'd been gone for so long. "Where have you been?" she asked as she emerged. He looked rough, but no worse than what she knew now to be usual. "Having tea and cakes with the unicorns. Sorry I forgot to bring any back for you. Were you worried about me?" Sabine chose to answer as flippantly as he. "Did you want me to be?" He snorted at that. Thanks to his infernal beard, Sabine couldn't tell if he was smiling, but she suspected he was. He took up his bundle of fresh clothes and brushed past her into the water closet, and then he caught her hand. "What's this?" He held up her arm, and the loose sleeve fell away to reveal the marks her practice had left. The bath had mostly healed the ones from yesterday, but the new ones glowed red in the light of the water closet. "I'm teaching myself to climb the mountain," she said plainly. "If we use your escape route, I will need the skill." He stared at her in silence for a long while. She braced herself for a mocking or a scolding, but neither came. "I'm glad you're clever," he said finally, and then disappeared into the closet. He had moved the enchanted basket, positioning it so that most of the rubble had emptied into it when he'd taken down the canopy. Sabine tidied up the rest before imploring the ivy cupboard to provide dinner for them both. When she opened the cupboard door, she found a pretty service of tea and cakes for two. The delicate porcelain dishes were pale lavender, lined with gold, and decorated with unicorns. Sabine threw her head back and laughed with her whole body until tears came to her eyes. She couldn't remember the last time she laughed so hard. "That's a sound I haven't heard in a very long time." Sabine lifted the tray of cakes and one of the cups and presented them to him. "You might have forgotten to bring me the unicorn's cakes, but the mountain did not. Now, would you like to picnic by the brazier, sit in the chair, or go straight to bed as usual?" He surprised her by not choosing to avoid her. "I'll take the chair if that's all right. The floor is too much like the ledge I slept on last night, and my bones still haven't forgiven me." Sabine set the tea and cakes on the table before returning to the ivy cupboard. This time, when she opened it, it provided 2 bowls of hearty stew. "So that's where you were." He downed 4 of the decorated cakes before tucking into the stew. Sabine gathered one of her pillows from her nest by the brazier and settled herself at his feet. "I cleared several ledges on the way for resting," he explained as they ate. "Now they need to be wide enough for 2, so I was working on that. By the time I finished, I was too tired to climb back down again." Sabine swallowed a sip of her tea. "Next time, I can clear the canopy and you can jump down." "That would be welcome," he said. "But if you don't mind, I'd like to stay down here a while and give you some climbing instruction. I'd rather not be all the way up here while you're falling, all the way up there while you're falling off the wall down here." The suggestion made a great deal of sense. She never would have expected him to offer instruction without being asked first. "That would be welcome," she said in return before he changed his mind. "Thank you." I'm going to go ahead and finish it there because we still have part 2 for next week. No, on Thursday. But thank you for joining me for part 1. This is The Glass Mountain, available at Amazon or my website or my store Envy. Link is in my bio. I still have a few left signed by both me and Bianca. This one is signed from Bianca to me because this is my personal copy. I love this artwork so much. I really do. So thank you for joining me for part 1. Join me on Thursday for part 2. And happy birthday, Mom. I love you so much. Mwah. I love all of you. In fact, my life is so much better with you in it. So stay safe and stick around. Love you, Mom.